So hey guys, welcome back to New Digs, and we are here on Jill's porch on a pollen-filled early June day. We've had a pollen apocalypse going on around here. It's just been insane.
Yes.
But that said, today we wanted to talk a little bit, do another of our episodes about design. We really enjoyed doing the last one.
Yeah, another Design 101. And this time we thought it'd be a good idea to talk to you about foliage in particular, and we're thinking texture and form are two things that we should really sort of touch on, because I think that's really important when you're designing a garden. And I think that I've really recently been looking at a lot at my garden really hard and realizing I have too much of certain textures in certain places.
Yeah.
And I need to kind of rethink a few things.
Yeah. And it's really all about, it's about contrast, really. I mean, that in order to draw the eye in, you want to have different things working against each other so that both of them, are shown better.
Right. Creating interest.
Yeah.
So basically, under the umbrella of texture for leaves, there's a certain amount of texture types. There's spiky.
Yep.
Think a sort of the strappiness of the leaves of iris, or even agapanthus, or spiky. That's the first texture of foliage. The second one is going to be bold, big bold leaves. Think hosta, elephant's ear, anything kind of big and tropical.
Yeah.
Astilboides, anything kind of big in scale.
Mm-hmm.
Even some hydrangeas with nice big leaves.
Right.
This one after spiky and bold, then it goes medium, and that's going to encompass most things, most plants.
Right.
And then it goes into a finer texture, and fine texture, I would say a lot of things like catmint,
little leaves,
fine leaf things.
I would say something like there's a plant that we talked about in one of our videos. I think it was last fall, the corydalis, which is that little ground covery kind of thing. A lot of the ground cover sedums have very fine foliage.
Right.
And I guess going with that, ferny would be another word that
the
you
last
used.
the last category would be Lacy. So that would be anything in the ferns, astilbes,
yarrow, even
anything that has like a really cut leaf thing. I would even put possibly like a really thread leaf Japanese maple or something could be in that kind of lacy. Anything that's really fine, complicated foliage. So those are the different sort of categories of foliage. But then the next thing is form. How the plant itself, when you stand back from it, aside from seeing the foliage up close, when you stand back from it, what shape is the plant? Is it going to be tall and spiky? And that could be delphiniums, it could be lupins, it could be alliums, it could
alliums are those big globes that have just passed, and those are kind of quintessential what I think about. Iris, anything that's spiky.
Foxgloves, anything that's kind of going to give it a little exclamation point.
Right.
And then the next, there could be vase-shaped plants.
Which would be things that would be kind of in this case, thinner at the bottom and open up this way.
Open up, and a lot of shrubs do that. Daylilies kind of have that shape. So that's sort of like one kind of shape in the garden. There's rounded, mounded kind of plants that sort of keep a mound.
Yep.
And Monty, where are you going? Okay. And there's sort of ground hugging. It could be ground covers or just sort of like low things as sort of another shape. And then weeping.
Yeah. And a lot of people love weeping things because it's sort of elegant. I mean, even in terms of shrubs or trees, a lot of people look for that particular shape, but certainly in perennials. And I think we're mainly talking about perennials in this video.
Yeah.
Although I think even in a container, you would want to be thinking about those different elements of form and
True.
leaf foliage. I mean,
True.
this sort of standard container combination would be a spike, like a dracaena, in the middle, and then something kind of in the middle, the filling part, and then something that a trailing habit. So again, and that's a perfect, in kind of a nutshell, what you're going for in the garden, little vignettes like that.
Right. So something that sort of has that kind of weeping quality might be a Hacknaqua,
Which is the Japanese forest grass.
Right. So something, and not for nothing, it also has that movement that's nice too.
Yeah,
everything.
and movement too. That's it's a little bit of a breezy day here today, and so that's something nice. It really allows you to see the movement in the garden, and grasses in particular, are great for that.
So the thing that we're trying to get to is that combining foliage textures in interesting ways is going to give you a lot more interest through the garden than just relying on flowers.
Right, and that's a really good point. I mean, a lot of times we think of a perennial border as just being flowers, but the thing about perennials, the great thing about them is they come back every year, of course. But unlike annuals, which are the ones we usually use in containers, they don't bloom all season. They have a shorter bloom period. So you're kind of thinking about what's going to be going on when the plants aren't blooming.
Right.
And of course, you are thinking about keeping the blooms going as much as possible. But this design element, I think, it's a really good point. It's just as important to think about as
the
foliage and the design, the form.
Right. So if you've got a Lacy astilbe next to a big bold hosta, that's sort of the classic combination in a shade garden, and it's really nice to kind of have these sort of interesting scale differences, texture differences going on, and it just gives you a lot more interest than if you had nothing but a whole bed of astilbe.
Right. Which in certain contexts, and we'll I'm sure be talking about in another video, different styles of gardens. But for the most part, our gardens tend to be a little more cottagey, I guess.
Yeah.
So we try to plant a lot of perennials that have these different forms and leaf shapes. And of course, in my case, we talked last time about color. So I also like to use, like a big chartreuse hosta with a strappy purple, thing or something. Just
right.
But it's all about this contrast.
So go back and watch that video.
Yeah. For color.
But I just think that if you have different shaped plants, if you've got a vista and you've got something sort of tall and spiky at the end, it's going to draw your eye through. If you've got interesting things to look at close in with the different foliage textures,
that's a really good point.
Then it slows you down and you look more closely at where you are. So
yeah, and that's a really good point. Even your perspective. So like if you are walking through a garden and you have something with very fine leaves and flowers right at your feet, it causes you to look with more detail, focus on the detail, whereas a big hosta in the back is kind of holding down the fort. And so even so, thinking about details for things you're going to see close up. And
are you trying to draw people out into a space, or are you trying to get them to kind of look at all the different tapestry that you've created?
Yeah, that's a good example. So I don't know, how about if we take a little walk through your garden and maybe see some examples? Hopefully. We will. So this is an interesting little spot in Jill's perennial bed. We didn't mention before when we were talking about leaves that some leaves are furry. And this is a lamb's ear. It's a great example of that. And a lot of people use it at the edges of beds because it's just so tempting to reach down and touch the leaves. They like pretty dry conditions. They can get kind of mushy if they get rained on too much, but really great plant. And I also wanted to mention, this is an allium, which we were talking about before. And this is past bloom. This is done. But many people like to leave the seed heads on as a decorative element in the garden, even though the bloom is technically past, because it's still an interesting focal point and an interesting texture. So sometimes a spot in your garden will just seem to call out for a non-plant element. And in this particular case, this brings some verticality in, and this is a copper obelisk in Jill's garden, and I think it's beautiful for that, again, that vertical element. So this is a really nice combination. We've got this beautiful lacy foliage of the Japanese maple that's playing off the Solomon seal. It has that nice weeping form, and then ferns in the background as well. So this is a really nice composition. So hey guys, thanks again for joining us here on New Digs in Jill's beautiful, beautiful June garden.
In progress.
In progress. But that's the nature of the beast, right? I mean, that's how gardens are, and that's what New Digs is about, really.
Exactly. I mean, every time we do a video, it's because we've been having conversations about that topic, and we just sort of wanted to share with you what we've been thinking about. So
and decisions, you know, that we're making in our new gardens as we develop them, and so you're kind of along for the ride in a process that's taking place in real time.
Yeah. So I'm glad you tuned in. So we'll see you next time on New Digs. I think we're going to be talking about.
It's another design episode, I think, on styles.
I think we're going to be talking about garden style. I think we're also going to be talking about water gardening sometime soon.
Yeah,
so.
That'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy June, and we will see you next time on New Digs.
Bye.
Bye.